Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back, way back, to a place where the sun didn't just shine, it insisted. A place where dust wasn't just on the furniture, it was in the furniture, on you, in you. Yes, we're heading to ancient Egypt not to explore pyramids or pharaohs. That would be far too exciting, wouldn't it? No, tonight we're talking about laundry, specifically how they washed clothes by the Nile. Imagine standing by that legendary river, the sun beating down like a personal spotlight determined to bake you to a crisp, the air thick with heat and the unique scent of river life. You're holding a heavy, probably not very clean garment, and you're about to begin a chore that makes wrestling an alligator look like a relaxing Sunday brunch. Okay, maybe not quite that bad, but trust me, this isn't exactly a walk in the park. You probably won't survive the sheer lack of explosive action. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is. Always curious to see where these quiet little corners of history find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So picture it. You are standing there, not in some air-conditioned laundry room with a shiny machine ready to do all the work. Oh no, you are baking. The sun is a relentless eye in a vast cloudless sky, pouring heat onto the land, bouncing off the sand, reflecting off the water. The Nile stretches out before you, shimmering under the intense light, looking inviting, but also, well, we'll get to the well part later. For now, just feel the heat. It wraps around you like a thick, scratchy blanket. It's the kind of heat that makes the air itself seem to vibrate, blurring the distant palms and the low mud brick buildings. This isn't a gentle warmth, it's an oppressive, energy-sapping force, and yet you need to clean clothes. Why? Because even in ancient Egypt, appearances mattered. Cleanliness, while perhaps not the germ-obsessed level we strive for today, was important. Your status, your respectability, even your comfort depended, in part, on the state of your garments. Most Egyptians wore linen, a fabric made from the flax plant. It's breathable, which is a blessing in this climate, but it also wrinkles easily and, of course, gets dirty. And dirt wasn't just dust from the desert, though there was plenty of that. It was sweat, yes, in copious amounts under the sun. It was spills from food, lentil stews, bread, maybe some fish from the river. It was the general grime of living in a world without paved roads or modern sanitation. You'd be rubbing shoulders with people, animals, the earth itself. It was a dirty business, life was. And the heat made everything worse. Sweat dried quickly, leaving salt marks. Dust seemed to adhere to damp skin and fabric instantly. You'd feel grimy almost as soon as you got dressed. The desire for clean, fresh linen wouldn't just be about looking good. It would be about feeling marginally less uncomfortable in an already incredibly challenging environment. Imagine putting on a fresh tunic after days in a sweaty, dusty one. That feeling of slight relief, of coolness against the skin, even just for a moment, would be worth the effort. But what an effort it was. No hot water tap, no detergent aisle at the local market, no washing machine tumbling away cheerfully in the background. You had the river, the sun of the sun, and whatever natural materials you could scrounge together that might, maybe, possibly lift a stain. This wasn't just a chore, it was a significant physical undertaking, usually performed by specific people, often men, whose job it was to handle the community's dirty laundry. It was hot, it was hard, and it was done right out there, exposed to the elements right by the water's edge. The Nile itself, the source of life, was also the source of the water for washing. It was a gift and a challenge all rolled into one. The river's level changed dramatically throughout the year thanks to the annual inundation. During the flood, the water spread out, bringing nutrient-rich silt that was essential for farming. But it also meant the river was a churning, muddy torrent. Trying to wash delicate linen in that would be like trying to clean your car in a mudslide. Not ideal. So laundry work was often tied to the river's cycle, becoming easier perhaps when the waters receded and became calmer and clearer, though still far from pristine by our standards. Standing there, you'd feel the fine grit under your bare feet, hear the buzz of insects, the distant bleating of goats, maybe the splash of a fish in the river. The air would smell of dust, the fertile earth, and the unmistakable scent of the Nile, a mix of fresh water, decaying plant matter, and whatever else might be floating or living in it. You'd look at the pile of dirty linen, the sweat already trickling down your temples just from standing still, and you'd know you had hours of strenuous work ahead of you in this relentless heat. The absolute necessity of cleaning clothes in this climate is a mainstream historical fact. It wasn't a luxury, it was part of maintaining health, hygiene and social order in a densely populated, hot, dusty environment. Fresh clothes offered some protection from skin irritations and infections, which were constant threats. Plus, let's be honest, nobody wants to hang around someone who smells like they have been wrestling a camel in a sandstorm. Now for a slightly quirkier tidbit related to the heat and clothes. Did you know that while the wealthy could afford vast quantities of fine sheer linen tunics, often changing them daily, the average person might have only a few garments? This meant those few pieces needed to be cleaned regularly, adding to the burden. And the very transparency of some of the finest linen wasn't just about fashion. In that heat, the less fabric between you and the air, the better. Imagine trying to wash and dry meters of almost see-through fabric without tearing it, all while fighting the sun and the dust. Historians still argue whether everyday Egyptians washed their own clothes regularly, or if they relied more heavily on professional launders than we currently understand. It seems likely a bit of both happened, simple rinsing at home for minor dirt, but significant cleaning probably went to the pros, the people whose job we are exploring tonight. Were launders hired by individual households, or did they work for temples or estates handling large volumes? The answer is probably yes, all of the above, depending on the era and social class, but the specifics for ordinary people remain a topic of discussion among scholars. So the stage is set, a world defined by the scorching sun and the life-giving yet challenging river, a society where clean clothes were a necessity, not just a nicety, and you, or someone like you, standing at the edge of the Nile, ready to begin the back-breaking, boring and utterly essential task of laundry ancient Egyptian style. The heat is just the first obstacle. There are many more to come. You're standing there, by the Nile, the sun still trying its best to turn you into a raisin. The pile of dirty linen feels heavier than it looks, and the task ahead seems monumental. But you're not just going to dunk the clothes in the muddy water and hope for the best. You need a few things, simple things by our standards, but essential tools of the trade back then. Think less high-tech washing machine, more ancient riverside workshop. First, you'll need a surface. A large, flat stone slab, if you can find one, is ideal. Maybe one that has been worn smooth by countless other washing sessions over generations. If not a stone, maybe a sturdy, slightly angled piece of wood. This is your washboard, your drum, your agitator, all in one. This is where the physical work, the pounding and scrubbing, is going to happen. It's not going to vibrate or play a little tune when it's done, just so you know you are the machine. Then you need something to, well, agitate the clothes. Your hands are good, of course, but for serious dirt, you need more power. Enter the mallets or clubs, simple wooden tools shaped like small baseball bats or heavy paddles. These aren't for swatting away oversized Nile mosquitoes, though you might be tempted. No, these are for beating the dirt out of the fabric. You'll lay the wet linen on your stone slab and pound it, trying to force the water and any cleaning agents through the fibers, literally beating the grime loose. Imagine doing that for hours. Suddenly, that annoying little hum your washing machine makes sounds like the sweetest symphony. Now for the cleaning agents themselves. Water alone, especially river water, isn't going to cut through grease and deeply ingrained dirt. They didn't have OxyClean or Tide Pods, but they had chemistry, ancient style. Their main weapon was something called natron. You might remember hearing about natron in relation to mummification. It's a naturally occurring salt mixture found in certain dry lake beds, particularly in the Wadi Natrun west of the Nile Delta. It's primarily sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. Think baking soda and washing soda, with some other bits mixed in. When dissolved in water, natron creates an alkaline solution. And alkaline solutions are pretty good at breaking down greasy and oily substances. So you'd have a supply of natron. It would likely look like a white crystalline powder or perhaps larger chunks you'd need to crush. You'd dissolve this in some water, maybe in a large pottery vessel or a pit dug in the ground near the river, creating your ancient Egyptian laundry detergent. It wouldn't foam up like modern soap, it would feel slightly zippery and perhaps have a faint mineral scent. Dipping the fabric into this solution would be step one in loosening the dirt's grip. Another common cleaning agent was ash, specifically ash from burnt plants. Like natron, wood ash contains alkali compounds, primarily potassium carbonate, potash. When mixed with water, this also creates an alkaline solution, albeit usually weaker than natron. Ash might have been more readily available for many people. Burning reeds, wood, or other plant matter from the riverbank or surrounding areas would provide this humble but effective cleanser. Sometimes the ash might be mixed with clay to create a paste, which could then be rubbed onto particularly stubborn stains. This whole process sounds less like doing laundry and more like preparing for a slightly damp, gritty science experiment, doesn't it? You might also use certain plant extracts. There are plants that contain saponins, natural compounds that can create a frothy lather and have cleansing properties. Think like natural soap, plants like soapwort, though maybe less common right by the Nile, or even parts of acacia trees could potentially have been used. However, natron and ash were likely the heavy hitters, the powerhouses of ancient Egyptian laundry tech. Using these required care. Too strong a solution and you could damage the delicate linen fibres. So you've gathered your tools, your stone slab, your wooden mallet, your natron, your ash, maybe some water pots. You've got your pile of dirty clothes. The sun is still blazing. The sounds of the river and the landscape are your background music. You take a deep breath, try not to inhale too much dust, and prepare to begin the labour-intensive process. Using natron as a cleaning agent for laundry and other purposes like hygiene and mummification is a well-established mainstream historical fact about ancient Egypt. Its chemical properties made it incredibly valuable in their daily lives and religious practices. They even mined it specifically for these uses. It was their all-purpose cleanser, deodorant, and preservative. Here's a quirky tidbit. Because natron was used for both cleaning clothes and preparing bodies for burial, there might have been a faint, slightly unsettling association between laundry day and, well, the afterlife. Honey, where's the natron? Could mean you needed to wash a tunic or prepare Grandpa for his eternal journey. Talk about multi-purpose. It makes you appreciate your separate cleaning supplies, doesn't it? Is this the bathroom cleaner or the fabric softener? Better not mix those up. Historians still argue whether specific recipes or concentrations for these cleaning solutions were standardized, or if they varied greatly depending on the launderer, the type of dirt, or the wealth of the client. Was there a secret family recipe for the best laundry natron mix passed down through generations of launders? Or was it more of a throw some natron in, see what happens approach? The exact methods and formulas used by everyday launders are not detailed in surviving texts, leaving room for scholarly debate on the level of sophistication and consistency in their cleaning practices. So you have your gritty desk detergents, your blunt instruments, and your sturdy surface. The preparation is complete. Now comes the real workout, the soaking, the pounding, the rubbing, the rinsing. It's a physically demanding sequence of steps, repeated over and over under the unforgiving sun. Your arms already ache just thinking about it. Let the ancient wash day commence. The tools are laid out, the detergents are prepared. You've got your grubby bundle of linen smelling faintly of sweat, Nile mud, maybe some old cooking grease, and who knows what else accumulated from daily life along the river. The first step, naturally, is to get everything wet. You'll take your dirty linen and plunge it into the water. This might be directly in a shallow part of the river, careful to avoid the stronger current and anything toothy lurking below the surface. Or more safely, you might use that pit you dug or a large pottery basin filled with water scooped from the river. Initially, it's just soaking, letting the fibres loosen up, letting the water start to penetrate the grime. This is a little like the pre-soak cycle on your modern machine, only without the satisfying little click and whir. You push the fabric down, feeling the coolness of the water, watching it change colour as the dirt begins to leach out. It's not pleasant water, mind you. The Nile was the lifeblood, but it wasn't exactly filtered and chlorinated. It carried silt, organic matter, and whatever else decided to float downstream. So you are dealing with murky water from the get-go. After an initial soak in plain water, or perhaps directly into a solution of water mixed with your chosen cleaning agent, the natron or the ash lye, you move to the active washing. You'll take a piece of fabric, maybe a simple tunic or a wrapped skirt heavy and dripping, and spread it out on your stone slab or wooden board. This is where the real physical labour begins. Remember that mallet? Now you pick it up. With the wet cloth spread flat on the hard surface, you begin to beat it. Not gently, you pound the fabric repeatedly with the mallet. The idea is to force the water and the dissolved cleaning agent through the fibres with brute force. Thwack! 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 The sound echoes slightly in the open air. You move across the fabric, systematically pounding every inch, trying to dislodge the dirt particles mechanically. It's rhythmic, exhausting work. Your arms start to ache pretty quickly. It's a full-body workout, actually. You're bending, lifting, pounding, shifting your weight. Forget the gym, just get a pile of ancient Egyptian laundry. This pounding technique wasn't just unique to Egypt. Variations were used in many ancient cultures where people washed clothes by hand in rivers or wash basins. It's a fundamental way to add agitation before the invention of mechanical devices. It makes sense. If you can't tumble or spin, you pound. It's the most direct way to get physical force onto the dirt. You might focus on particularly dirty areas, giving them extra attention with the mallet. Stains from food, grease, or the ever-present Nile mud need serious persuasion to leave the linen. As you pound, you might periodically soak the section in the cleaning solution or rinse it briefly in the river to see how much dirt has come out and to introduce fresh cleaning agent. Think about the repetition. You have a pile of clothes, maybe several tunics, some loincloths, perhaps a finer robe if you're washing for someone important. Each piece needs this treatment. You spread it out, pound, 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 flip it over, pound, 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 move to the next section. It's monotonous, physically demanding, and seemingly endless. You might find yourself falling into a trance-like state, the rhythmic thud of the mallet on the stone the only sound besides the lapping of the river and the calls of birds. Maybe you develop calluses the size of small dates. This method is effective, surprisingly so for its simplicity, but it's also harsh on the fabric. Linen, while durable, can fray and weaken with repeated pounding and rubbing against a hard surface. This is probably why ancient Egyptian clothing often looks slightly worn or thin in depictions. It earned its wear and tear the hard way. While pounding helps loosen the dirt, some areas will require more targeted attention. This is where scrubbing comes in. Using your hands, you might rub the fabric against itself or against the wash slab, focusing on stains. Sometimes a handful of coarse sand from the riverbank might be used as an abrasive, rubbed into particularly stubborn spots like a natural scouring powder. Imagine using sand on your delicate fabrics today. No thank you. But necessity is the mother of invention, and sand was certainly abundant. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Archaeological evidence, including depictions in tombs and the discovery of stone-washed slabs, confirms that pounding and rubbing clothes on a hard surface, often by the Nile, was a standard method of washing laundry in ancient Egypt. These washboards weren't elaborate. They were simply functional tools suited to the task and available materials. A quirky tidbit you might ponder while you pound away is that the Egyptians believed cleanliness was incredibly important, not just for hygiene but for religious purity. Priests in particular had very strict rules about washing their bodies and their linen multiple times a day. Your task, even if for a commoner, was contributing to a society that valued cleanliness highly. Perhaps more so than many of their contemporaries. You were performing a vital service, ensuring people could approach their gods and go about their day without being deemed unclean. It gives your aching arms a little dignity, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether there was a recognized profession solely dedicated to laundry, or if it was primarily a task performed by household members, especially women or slaves. Were there professional launderers offering services in towns? Or was washing mainly done by individuals or families for themselves? The evidence is fragmented, leading to scholarly debate on the structure of laundry labour in different social classes and time periods within ancient Egypt. Were you a professional today, or just stuck with your own family's grime? The pounding continues. The sun climbs higher. The pile of dirty clothes seems to shrink incredibly slowly. Each piece demands your full attention, your physical effort. You thwack the linen, feeling the satisfying, or maybe just tiring impact. This is the core of the ancient Egyptian wash day. Sheer repetitive physical work aimed at literally beating the dirt into submission. And you've only just started. The dirt is loosening, but it's far from gone. The thudding of the mallet echoes slightly in your ears, a persistent rhythm that's become the soundtrack to your efforts. Your arms are definitely feeling it now. But the simple beating, while effective at loosening the superficial dirt, isn't enough. You need chemistry, you need the power of alkalis. So you turn your attention to the cleaning agents you prepared. There's the natron, that mineral salt gathered from places like the Wadi el Natrun, west of the Nile Delta. It's a naturally occurring mix of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, with a bit of sodium chloride, table salt, and sodium sulfate thrown in. It looks like a greyish or yellowish crystalline powder. Then there's the ashlye, made by soaking wood ash, probably from the fires used for cooking or heating, in water and letting the solid settle, leaving you with a cloudy alkaline liquid. Ashlye contains potassium carbonate, another strong alkali. You've mixed these with water in separate containers, or maybe added them directly to the wash basin or pit where your clothes are soaking. Now, you start working these solutions into the pounded fabric. You ladle the natron solution over the cloth spread on the slab, or you plunge the fabric back into the basin containing the lye. As you rub and manipulate the wet, pounded linen with your hands, You feel the difference. The water isn't just water anymore. It feels slightly slick, perhaps a little bit soapy, though not like the bubbly lather you're used to from modern soap. Ancient Egyptian cleaning agents worked by saponification, reacting with the fats and oils in the dirt and sweat to create a kind of basic soap right there on the fabric, or simply by breaking down the organic grime with their alkaline properties. You rub the fabric against itself, or continue to rub it against the rough surface of the stone slab or washboard. Your hands are constantly in the alkaline water, which isn't great for your skin, by the way. It feels drying and a little bit corrosive over time. Maybe your fingertips start to feel rough and pruned. This isn't exactly a spa treatment. Your hands are getting a workout as well as the clothes. You watch the water turn even murkier as the natron and lye get to work, lifting the remaining dirt that the pounding couldn't dislodge. The solution penetrates the weave of the linen, getting into the tiny spaces between the fibres where dirt likes to hide. You might even see small bubbles, not from soap, but maybe from a chemical reaction happening. The smell is probably not roses and lavender. Natron itself doesn't have a strong odour, but mixed with damp, dirty linen and the earthy smell of the Nile water, and perhaps a faint tang from the ash lye. It's probably just the smell of raw effort and damp earth. Nothing like walking down the laundry aisle today with all those artificial fragrances. You just had the authentic scent of clean as defined by mineral salts and wood ash. You really appreciate your detergent aisle now, don't you? You keep working the solution in and rubbing and squeezing, focusing on stubborn areas. Maybe you're using that brush made of plant fibres you gathered earlier, scrubbing vigorously at a particularly bad stain. The bristles scrape against the fabric, helping the alkaline solution penetrate. This is where the magic, or rather the chemistry, really happens, breaking down the greasy bonds holding the dirt to the fibres. A mainstream historical fact about this process, natron was not only used for laundry, it was famously a key ingredient in the mummification process because of its drying and preserving properties. This dual use highlights its importance as a natural resource in ancient Egyptian society. It literally helped clean the living and prepare the dead. Quite versatile stuff. A quirky tidbit you might muse on is how vital these natural substances were. Access to natron sources or sufficient wood for ash could impact how clean people could keep their clothes. Imagine a society where your access to cleaning supplies depended on geological deposits or deforestation rates. Suddenly, that trip to the supermarket doesn't seem so arduous. People went to considerable effort to obtain and transport these materials. Historians still argue whether specific concentrations of natron or lye were recommended or commonly used for different types of garments or levels of dirtiness. Were there standard recipes passed down, or was it more of an intuitive process based on experience? We know they understood the power of these substances, but the precise formulas they used for laundry aren't fully detailed in surviving texts, leaving room for scholarly debate about the standardization of their cleaning practices. You continue to rub and knead the fabric in the solution. It's a messy physical job. Your arms ache, your hands are raw, and you're probably splashed with murky alkaline water. But you can see the difference. The water is getting darker, and the fabric under your hands feels different. It's starting to feel cleaner, less slick with grime. You might repeat this process, drain the dirty water, add fresh water and more agent, and work it in again, depending on how dirty the item is. For very soiled garments, this application and working in of the cleaning kit might happen multiple times before you even think about rinsing. The sun beats down, the Nile flows by indifferently, and you are lost in the repetitive motion of rubbing and squeezing, pushing the alkaline solution through the fibers, the simple chemistry of ancient life played out through back-breaking labour by the riverbank. It's a powerful reminder of how much effort went into basic tasks we take for granted today. And you still have a pile to get through. You've worked the alkali in, felt the slippery texture change as the natron and lye did their job, breaking down the grime. Your hands might feel dry and a little tight, a reminder of the chemical power you're wielding. The wash water is thick and opaque with suspended dirt and used cleaning agents. Pounding loosened it, the alkalis lifted it, but now you have a sodden, heavy piece of linen, still holding on to all that mess, just in liquid form. It's time for the rinse. This is where the river truly takes centre stage again, not just as a source of water, but as the great purifier. You lift the heavy, dripping bundle from the washing pit or slab. It feels much heavier now, saturated with water and cleaning solution. You probably move a little downstream, or to a section of the riverbank known for its slightly cleaner water or a gentle current. This isn't a casual dunk. This is a sustained physical effort to flush everything out of the fibres. You plunge the fabric into the flowing Nile water. Instantly, the murky liquid trapped within the cloth begins to billow out, mixing with the river's flow. You swish it back and forth, feeling the current tugging at the heavy material. You lift it out, let it drain for a moment, then plunge it back in again. Swish, lift, drain, plunge, over and over. You might spread the fabric out on the riverbed in a shallow area, letting the water flow over and through it, using your hands to push the water through the weave, persuading the last bits of dirt and, crucially, the alkaline residue to let go. Think about the sheer volume of water you're using here compared to a modern washing machine rinse cycle. It's practically infinite, or at least as much as the mighty Nile can provide. There's no tiny little cup of fabric softener going in here. It's just you, the linen, and the endless flow of the river. It's kind of beautiful in its simplicity, isn't it? Also exhausting, but definitely simple. You squeeze sections of the cloth underwater, forcing the dirty water out and allowing fresh water to rush in. You rub parts of it against itself again, or maybe against a smooth water-worn stone if you found one suitable on the riverbed. The goal is to get the river water to penetrate every single fibre, every tiny space in the weave, and carry away anything that shouldn't be there. The alkali, if left in, would make the linen feel stiff, irritate the skin, and potentially weaken the fibres over time. So rinsing thoroughly is absolutely critical for both comfort and the longevity of the garment. As you rinse, you watch the water running off the fabric. Initially, it's still cloudy and perhaps slightly coloured, but with each successive dunking and squeezing, the water runs clearer and clearer. This is the visual feedback loop that tells you you're making progress. The fabric itself starts to feel less slick, less like it's been treated with a harsh chemical, and more like clean, damp linen. The physical toll of this step is significant. Lifting and manipulating waterlogged fabric is heavy work. Your back aches from bending, your arms and shoulders burn from the constant lifting and squeezing. Your hands are constantly wet, maybe still stinging a little from the alkali, now pruned and soft from the prolonged immersion. You might be kneeling on the muddy or sandy bank, your knees getting dirty just as you're trying to clean things. It's a full-body workout, with the ever-present risk of slipping into the river or, depending on the time of year and location, attracting unwanted attention from local wildlife. Remember those crocodiles? Yeah, they like shallow water sometimes. Just something to keep you motivated, I guess. Nothing like a potential snack threat to make you rinse faster. You might develop a rhythm, a cadence to the plunging and squeezing. A quiet, repetitive task, performed under the vast Egyptian sky, with the sounds of the river and maybe distant calls of birds or other people working along the bank. It's not a silent task, but it's meditative in its repetition. The sun is probably high now, beating down and warming the water slightly where you are working. The air smells of damp earth and river water, a mainstream historical fact about the Nile's importance in this process. The annual flooding, the inundation, was crucial for Egyptian agriculture and life, but it also significantly impacted the river's water quality. During the flood and immediately after, the water would be laden with silt, making it less ideal for washing and especially rinsing delicate fabrics if you wanted them to remain their original colour. The clearest water was available later in the year, after the floodwaters had receded and the suspended sediment settled. This meant that the best time for serious laundry, especially for fine linen, might have been dictated by the natural cycle of the Nile itself. A quirky tidbit is that while we imagine them just kneeling by the bank, some depictions and archaeological findings suggest more structured washing areas might have existed in certain places, perhaps paved areas near the river, or even basin-like structures fed by channels from the river where the water flow could be managed for rinsing. It wasn't always just a free-for-all squatting by the water's edge. They might have had purpose-built spots, like ancient laundromats without the machines or questionable smells. Historians still argue whether Egyptians used any form of rinsing additive, perhaps fragrant herbs or even mineral salts in very low concentrations, during the final rinse to impart a scent or perhaps act as a very mild fabric brightener. While the primary goal was clearly removing dirt and alkali, the possibility of adding something for a pleasant smell or finish isn't entirely ruled out. Though concrete evidence is scarce, leaving the specifics of any final touch rinsing steps a matter of scholarly debate. Did their linen smell like sun-dried linen and nothing else? Or did they have secret ancient Egyptian dryer sheets? We may never know for sure. You continue rinsing. Each piece of fabric needs this attention. You can't rush it, or you'll end up with stiff, irritating clothes. Imagine trying to wear a finely pleated linen garment that still has natron residue in it. It would feel like sandpaper, so you keep going, plunging, swishing, squeezing, watching the water run clear. It feels like you're doing the same motion 100 times for each piece. If you thought the pounding was repetitive, rinsing is its endless cousin. You move on to the next piece, the rhythm restarting. Grab the alkali-soaked cloth, move it to the rinse spot, plunge it in, feel the weight, start the swishing and squeezing. The sun climbs higher, or perhaps starts to dip lower depending on when you began this marathon. The pile of unrinsed, alkali-soaked laundry slowly shrinks, while the pile of rinsed, dripping fabric grows beside you. It's a simple, tangible measure of your progress. You might be working alongside others, family members, neighbours, perhaps even paid washers if you're wealthy. The riverbank becomes a place of communal labour, chatter mingling with the sounds of washing. Maybe someone is singing to pass the time. The shared effort makes the task slightly less grueling, or at least provides a distraction. But even with company, the rinsing still requires your arms, your back, your pruny hands. There's no delegation of the physical act itself. Think about the state of the fabric after all this. Pounded, soaked in strong alkaline solutions, rigorously rubbed and squeezed, then subjected to multiple rounds of rinsing in moving water. The linen is clean, but it's been through a lot. It's soft from the cleaning, but also potentially a bit roughed up from the process. It's definitely not dry clean only. This is heavy-duty cleaning for durable material. You respect that linen because you know exactly how much work goes into making it wearable again. You pick up another piece, maybe a simple tunic or a heavier cloak. The rinsing process is the same, demanding the same patient, repetitive action. The water flows, indifferent to your aching muscles, offering its cleansing power as it has for millennia. You are just one small part of an unbroken line of people performing this same task. By the same river under the same sun, for thousands of years, and you still have a few items left to rinse. The rinse cycle, ancient Egyptian style, is a commitment. Your hands are sore, pruned, and perhaps a little shaky from the effort of rinsing. You've done battle with the trapped dirt and alkali, and for now the linen is clean, submerged in the river, or perhaps sitting in a basket beside you, dripping profusely. But it's soaked, absolutely saturated. Imagine taking a heavy beach towel that's just been through the washing machine and trying to wear it. Not comfortable, right? That's pretty much what you've got now, multiplied by the weight of millennia of water and the density of hand-loomed linen. So the next crucial step is to get as much of that water out as possible before the sun can even begin its work. This involves a whole lot of squeezing and wringing. You lift a piece from the water. It's heavy, unbelievably heavy. The water pours off it in sheets for a moment, but the fibres still hold on to a massive amount. You gather a section in your hands, perhaps starting at one end of a tunic or a wrap, and begin to squeeze, hard. You press your palms together, forcing the water out in a torrent. It feels good in a way to see the water leaving the fabric, a visual confirmation of your progress. You work your way down the length of the garment, squeezing section by section. For smaller items, or perhaps for the main body of a large piece, you might attempt to wring it. This is a bit trickier with delicate linen, especially if it's very fine or thin. You take an end in each hand and twist, twisting opposite directions, creating a spiral of fabric that squeezes the water out from the center. You have to be careful not to twist too hard, or you could damage the weave, maybe even tear the fabric, especially if it's old or already a bit worn. You don't want to undo all that hard work of gentle washing and rinsing by aggressively destroying the textile now. It's a balance. Firm pressure to extract water, but careful handling to preserve the garment. It's not like wringing out a dish rag. This requires a touch more finesse. As you squeeze and wring, the fabric visibly thins out, becoming less swollen with water. The weight reduces little by little. You might shake the garment out vigorously after squeezing a section, using centrifugal force, ancient Egyptian style, to fling away remaining droplets. The air around you gets misted with the spray. It's a surprisingly physical and splashy part of the process. Think about doing this for an entire load of laundry, not just one tunic, but maybe several plus wraps, possibly some bed linen if you're doing a big wash. Each item requires this individual attention, this hands-on dewatering. It's not quick. Your hands cramp, your forearms start to ache from the repetitive squeezing and twisting motion. The water running off is clear now, thankfully, proving your rinsing was effective. Once you've squeezed and wrung each piece as much as you dare, you might give it another shake and spread it out briefly to check for any missed spots or, heaven forbid, damage. You're preparing it for the final stage, drying. The goal now is to maximize the surface area exposed to the air and sun. You gather the semi-dry pieces. They're still quite damp, but manageable now, not heavy sodden lumps. Where do you take them? The riverbank isn't ideal for long-term drying, too much risk of getting dirty again from the mud or sand or being trampled. So you likely move to a cleaner area, perhaps a patch of dry ground slightly away from the water's edge, or maybe back towards your home if it's nearby and has suitable outdoor space. The sun is the ancient Egyptians' best friend for drying laundry. And oh, what a friend it is. The Egyptian climate is famously dry and sunny for most of the year. This is a huge advantage for drying things quickly and effectively. Think about trying to air dry, heavy fabric in a damp, cold climate. It would take ages and probably end up smelling mildewy. Here, the sun is intense, and the air is typically low in humidity, a perfect combination for evaporation. A mainstream historical fact about Egyptian drying. The sun was the primary method of drying. There's no evidence of heated drying rooms or tumble dryers, obviously. The warmth of the sun, combined with the dry air and potentially a gentle breeze, did all the work. This wasn't just convenient. Sunlight is also a natural bleach and disinfectant, helping to whiten linen and kill bacteria. It was truly a multi-purpose tool in the laundry process. You find your drying spot. It could be simply laying the fabric out flat on clean ground, spread out to catch the most sun. You might drape tunics over the bushes or low walls if available. Some depictions show laundry hung over ropes stretched between posts, similar to a modern clothesline, but perhaps less common for everyday, less precious items which might just get spread out. Finer linens or items requiring specific shaping might be laid out flat on mats or clean surfaces to dry carefully. A quirky tidbit is the potential use of drying frames or specialized racks, especially for items that needed to maintain specific shapes or pleats during drying. While widespread evidence is lacking, some tomb paintings or models might hint at structures used specifically for stretching and drying textiles. Imagine a wooden frame onto which a tunic is pinned or tied to keep its shape perfectly as it dries in the sun. This would be particularly important for formal wear or priestly garments which might have complex pleats or finishes. As you lay out the fabric, you smooth it out, straightening edges and folds, trying to minimize wrinkles. The sun immediately starts to warm the damp fibers. The air feels dry and still, or perhaps there's a welcome gentle breeze rustling the linen, speeding up the evaporation. You arrange the pieces carefully, making sure they aren't overlapping too much, allowing maximum exposure. You might have to adjust them as the sun moves across the sky to keep them in direct light, or perhaps move them into shade if the sun is too intense and you're worried about colour fading. Though linen was typically bleached white, fading might still be a concern for dyed items. You also have to be mindful of pests or animals. You don't want your freshly cleaned, still damp laundry becoming a snack for goats, a nesting spot for birds, or getting tracked on by stray dogs. So you might need to dry it in a secure area, or keep an eye on it. Drying laundry wasn't just a passive activity, it required vigilance. Historians still argue whether Egyptians routinely used any form of stiffening agent or starch applied at the drying stage or immediately after. While evidence for formal starching as we know it is limited, some researchers suggest natural gums or weak solutions of plant extracts might have been used to give fabric a bit more body or help hold pleats in place. The debate centers on whether this was a common practice for everyday wear or limited to ceremonial or high-status garments. Did they just rely on the natural stiffness of linen and careful folding, or was there an ancient Egyptian equivalent of spray starch? We don't definitively know the widespread practice. The process of drying seems simple, just put it in the sun, right? But it's the culmination of all the steps you've just performed. The fabric needs to be clean and free of residue for the sun to work its magic effectively, without baking in any remaining dirt or alkali. You check on the pieces periodically, feeling them, noticing how the cool dampness gives way to dry warmth. The fabric lightens in colour as the water evaporates, regaining its crispness or at least its non-sodden state. This stage offers a moment of relative rest compared to the pounding and rinsing. You can sit for a bit, maybe chat with others whose laundry is also drying nearby, or just enjoy the feeling of the sun on your skin while keeping a watchful eye on your drying treasures. It smells clean now, that fresh sun-baked linen smell, miles better than the natron and dirty water smell from earlier. As the water leaves the fabric, the weave becomes more apparent again. The linen starts to feel light and airy once more. It's a satisfying transformation. You can almost feel the energy of the sun drawing the moisture out. It's ancient technology at its finest, harnessing natural power to achieve a necessary domestic task. And you've earned this little break supervising the great cosmic dryer at work. The sun has done its work. You reach out and touch the fabric you laid out earlier. It's no longer heavy and damp, clinging stubbornly to the ground. It feels light, perhaps a little stiff from drying taut in the sun, but undeniably dry. The fibres are crisp again, no longer swollen with water. You might hear a faint rustle as you gather a piece, a gentle sound compared to the squelch of earlier. The warm smell of sun-baked linen fills the air, a comforting scent that signals the job is almost complete. You begin gathering your clean, dry laundry. You pick up a tunic, shaking it out one last time. It hangs correctly now, light and airy. No longer a sodden sack, but a recognizable garment. As you collect the pieces, you might fold them or roll them. Folding seems the most straightforward way to manage the fabric, especially for storage. You smooth the fabric out on a relatively clean surface, perhaps a mat you brought with you, or a smooth patch of ground, avoiding any stray pebbles or twigs. You start with a simple fold, perhaps lengthwise, then across. For a simple tunic, this might be all that's needed. Wraps and kilts might be rolled or folded into manageable bundles. Finer or more delicate items would be handled with extra care, perhaps folded fewer times or rolled gently to prevent sharp creases that could stress the fibres. Imagine folding sheets, not complicated, but you want to make them relatively neat so they don't take up too much space. It's not like you have endless closet space here. Efficient storage is key. As you fold, you might notice any lingering wrinkles. Linen is notorious for wrinkling. It's a natural fibre, beautiful and breathable, but it doesn't just magically become smooth when it dries. So once folded, what happened next? Did they just live with wrinkles? Probably to some extent, but for important garments, or perhaps just to make storage easier, some form of pressing or smoothing was likely employed. A mainstream historical fact. While the heated iron didn't exist, ancient Egyptians did use methods to smooth and press fabrics. Evidence suggests they might have used smooth, heavy stones or blocks of wood to press folded laundry, effectively flattening out wrinkles. You might stack the folded pieces and place a heavy weight on top for a period, letting gravity and pressure do the work. This wouldn't give you the crisp, sharp creases of modern ironing, but it would certainly help make the fabric less rumpled and easier to store neatly. Think about putting heavy books on a piece of paper to flatten it. Same basic idea. You'd finish folding your laundry, stack the piles, and maybe put a heavy stone or a wooden plank weighted down with something on top. You'd leave it there while you did other tasks, letting the pressure work its magic on the linen fibres. It's low-tech, but effective for reducing bulk and wrinkles. Once folded and perhaps pressed, the laundry needs to be stored. Where did clean clothes go? They certainly didn't hang in open closets like many people use today. Storage was primarily in chests or baskets. Wooden chests, sometimes beautifully decorated, were common for storing valuable items, including clothing. Baskets made from woven reeds or palm leaves were also used for storage, perhaps for more everyday items or larger quantities of fabric. A quirky tidbit about storage. To protect clothes from insects, particularly moths and silverfish which love to munch on natural fibres, Egyptians might have included natural deterrents in their chests or baskets. Evidence suggests they sometimes placed bundles of herbs, such as cedarwood shavings or other aromatic plants, among the stored linens. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of mothballs, but probably smelled a lot nicer. Imagine opening a chest and getting a whiff of dried herbs mixed with the scent of clean sun-dried linen. Much more pleasant than modern chemical moth repellents, that's for sure. So you would carefully place your folded and pressed laundry into a chest or basket. You'd arrange it neatly to make the most of the space. Perhaps the tunics go here, the wraps there, smaller items like headbands or sashes in a corner, or a smaller container within the chest. Keeping things organised wasn't just about tidiness, it made it easier to find what you needed and help preserve the condition of the clothes. Piling things in haphazardly would lead to more wrinkles and potential damage. Did different social classes have different storage methods? Probably. Wealthier households would likely have more elaborate wooden chests, perhaps even dedicated storage rooms. Less wealthy individuals might rely more on baskets or simpler containers, maybe even just storing folded clothes on shelves or mats within their homes, still using herbs for protection if they could afford them. The principle remained the same: keep the clean clothes together, protected and reasonably neat. Historians still argue whether specific items of clothing were stored differently based on their use or status. Were priestly garments stored in a separate, more sacred location? were everyday work clothes simply piled into a basket while fine linen wraps were carefully folded and placed in a decorated chest? The debate centres on the degree of differentiation in storage practices across different social strata and for different types of textiles. We have tomb paintings showing chests of clothing, but these often depict elite life and might not represent the average person's storage solutions. The process of taking the laundry from the drying area back to storage would also involve carrying it, perhaps balanced on your head if it was a large bundle in a basket, or carried in your arms. You might walk past neighbours also finishing their laundry tasks, perhaps exchanging a few words about the heat or the quality of the drying sun today. It's a communal aspect of the work, even the final stages. Think about the satisfaction of putting away a load of clean laundry, that feeling of accomplishment, seeing the neat piles of clothes ready to be worn again. It was the same for the ancient Egyptians. You've spent hours, perhaps days on this task, and now the result is tangible. Stacks of clean, fresh linen, ready for the next wear cycle. No more dirty, sweat-soaked, sandy garments. The final step in the laundry process, before the clothes were worn again, was often just taking them out of storage. There's no concept of an ancient Egyptian freshen-up cycle in a machine. The cleanliness and freshness came from the intense washing, the sun-drying, and potentially the stored herbs. When you needed a clean tunic, you'd go to the chest or basket, lift the heavy stone if you used one, and retrieve a garment. It might have some wrinkles, yes, but it would be clean. The amount of care put into folding, pressing, and storing reflects how valuable textiles were. Clothes weren't disposable like much of our fast fashion today. They were investments, often made of labour-intensive linen. Preserving them, keeping them clean and in good condition, was important for both appearance and economy. A well-maintained wardrobe meant less frequent need to replace items, which was a significant expense, so the care extended beyond just the washing. It included the post-wash handling and storage. This whole process, from gathering dirty laundry to putting away the clean, touches so many aspects of daily life. The relationship with the river, the use of natural materials and processes, the importance of cleanliness for social status and religious purity, the value of textiles, and the daily rhythms of domestic work. It wasn't just about getting stains out, it was a fundamental part of managing a household and participating in Egyptian society. And you, standing there, perhaps brushing off a bit of dust from the top of a stored chest, have completed another cycle of this ancient essential task. So you've finished putting away your stack of clean sun-kissed linen. The chests are full, the baskets neatly packed. It's a good feeling. But what if you had a lot of laundry? What if you were wealthy or part of a large household or like a temple or the pharaoh's palace? Would you really be down by the riverbank wrestling with a huge pile of tunics and kilts yourself? Probably not. Just like today, where some people prefer to do their own laundry and others send it out or use a service, ancient Egypt had its own version of commercial or professional laundry services. This wasn't just for the super rich, though they were certainly the main clientele. Temples, which had vast quantities of linen for priests' garments, temple hangings, and even mummy wrappings, definitely needed specialists. The royal court, with its endless demands for fresh, clean clothing for the pharaoh and his retinue, would also rely on these services. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egypt had professional laundry workers, often referred to as laundrymen or fullers. These weren't just individuals doing a bit of washing on the side. They were part of a recognised trade, sometimes working in workshops associated with large institutions like temples or noble estates. These laundrymen handled large volumes of textiles and developed specific techniques beyond basic riverbank washing. Imagine this as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of your local dry cleaner or commercial laundry service. You'd bundle up your finest linen, and probably your everyday stuff too if you were important enough, and send it off to these specialists. They had the space, the labour, and potentially more effective methods or materials than the average household had access to. It wasn't a quick same-day service, of course. You'd hand over your dirty laundry, and sometime later it would be returned, hopefully clean, pressed, and ready to wear. These professional laundry operations were often located close to the Nile, for obvious reasons. Access to water was paramount. They might have dedicated facilities, perhaps stone basins or vats, rather than just using the open riverbank. This allowed for more controlled washing, soaking, and rinsing processes, especially when dealing with large quantities or particularly valuable fabrics. Working as a professional laundryman was physically demanding and likely not a glamorous job. You'd be dealing with large amounts of dirty linen, often heavy when wet, and using some pretty harsh cleaning agents, which we'll touch upon later. It was a necessary service, though, especially in a society that valued cleanliness and appearance. Think about the sheer volume of linen used in religious ceremonies, state functions, or even just kitting out a large noble's household staff. It was a constant, never-ending task. Someone had to do it on a larger scale than the family wash. A quirky tidbit about the laundry trade. While the term fuller is often associated with cleaning wool, which the Egyptians didn't use as much as linen, the Egyptian laundrymen likely performed a similar range of tasks, washing, bleaching, and potentially even fulling or thickening certain fabrics, though this is less clear for linen. They might have used techniques to make the linen softer or improve its drape, perhaps through repeated pounding or specialized soaking. It wasn't just about getting the dirt out, it could also be about conditioning the fabric. Imagine them working rhythmically, perhaps pounding linen in a vat with wooden mallets, creating a sort of ancient fabric softener effect. Maybe they even had catchy work songs, though that's pure speculation, but a nice thought while you drift off. Who were these laundrymen? Were they slaves, paid labourers, or perhaps part of a guild-like structure associated with temples? Evidence suggests a mix. Some might have been temple servants, others possibly skilled labourers paid for their work. The job likely had a low social status given the nature of the work and the materials handled. You weren't exactly invited to dinner parties after a long day dealing with soiled linen, right? But they were essential workers. Historians still argue whether the professional laundry workshops handled only large institutional loads, or if wealthy private citizens also routinely sent their family laundry there. The debate centres on how widespread access to these services was. Were they exclusive to the elite and institutions, or could a well-off merchant, for instance, also pay to have their household laundry done professionally? The archaeological and textual evidence is often from elite contexts, tombs, temples, making it harder to gauge the laundry habits of the middle class or wealthier commoners. Think about the logistics involved. Getting large bundles of dirty laundry from a palace in Thebes to a riverside workshop, then getting the clean laundry back. It would require coordination, perhaps involving porters or servants responsible for the transport. It wasn't just a simple drop-off and pick-up like your modern dry cleaner. This was pre-cartage on wheels for widespread use, often requiring carrying loads on backs or by boat. The existence of these professional laundrymen highlights that laundry wasn't only a domestic chore for everyone. For those who could afford it, or for institutions with massive textile needs, it was outsourced to specialists. This suggests a level of organisation and trade specialisation within Egyptian society that goes beyond just farming and crafting. It's about service industries, ancient style. These professional operations might have also had access to better or more consistent supplies of cleaning agents. While households used natron and ash, a professional laundry might have had larger stores or more refined versions of these materials. They might also have developed techniques for dealing with particularly stubborn stains, perhaps using specific poultices or longer soaking times that weren't practical for a family doing laundry on the riverbank. Working in one of these professional laundry facilities would be noisy and smelly. The pounding of fabric, the splashing of water, the strong alkaline smell of the cleaning agents, the general odour of wet, dirty linen, not exactly a spa experience. The laundrymen probably spent long hours stooped over basins or working in the water, potentially exposed to the elements, be it the hot sun or cooler winds. It was hard, repetitive physical. We can imagine the scenes depicted in tomb paintings, though often idealised, sometimes show workers engaged in various tasks, including what might be laundry or textile production step. These depictions offer clues about the tools and methods used, but they rarely capture the full reality of the grime and the effort involved. So while you might picture yourself doing your family's wash down by the Nile, remember that there was another layer to the ancient Egyptian laundry story, the professional who handled the heavy loads for the powerful institutions and the elite. They were the unsung heroes, or perhaps just stoic labourers, who kept the pharaoh's tunics sparkling, the temple hangings pristine, and the mummies wrapped in the whitest possible linen. Their existence allowed the upper classes to maintain their standards of cleanliness and appearance without having to get their own hands dirty. And that, my friends, is a luxury that has endured through the millennia. Okay, so whether you are a humble householder doing your family's laundry by the river, or one of those professional laundrymen handling massive loads for a temple, you needed something to actually clean the fabric. And let me tell you, it wasn't Tide Pods. Nope, no brightly coloured packets or satisfying suds. The ancient Egyptian approach to detergent was, well, earthy, and definitely not something you'd accidentally ingest. You see, the concept of soap as we know it, a mixture of fat and lye, wasn't really a thing for laundry in ancient Egypt, at least not widely or in the same way we understand it. They had substances for personal cleansing, sometimes oils mixed with alkaline salts, but for cleaning textiles they relied on nature's own cleaning agents. And the primary workhorse in their laundry arsenal was something called natron, a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians used natron, a naturally occurring mineral salt found extensively in places like the Wadi el Natrun, the Natron Valley, in Lower Egypt, as their main cleaning agent for textiles. Natron is basically a mix of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, regular salt, and sodium sulfate. When dissolved in water, the sodium carbonate part creates an alkaline solution. Think of natron as their all-purpose ancient cleaning powder. It's like the great-great-great-grandparent of baking soda and washing soda combined, but raw and perhaps a bit more variable in composition depending on where it was dug up. The alkalinity was key. Just like modern detergents use alkaline builders to help lift grease and dirt from fabrics, the alkalinity of natron helped break down oils and fats that were clinging to the linen fibers. It essentially saponified, turned into soap, some of the fatty grime, making it easier to wash away. Imagine scooping this powdery, sometimes crystalline substance into your washing basin, or directly onto the wet fabric. It would probably feel a bit gritty. You'd dissolve it in water, creating this slightly slippery, perhaps faintly smelling, maybe a bit sulphurous depending on impurities, solution. It wouldn't foam up like modern soap, which is designed to create suds. Suds aren't actually necessary for cleaning, but they sure do make you feel like things are getting clean, don't they? The ancient Egyptians had to trust the invisible chemical reaction happening in the water. Besides natron, another important cleaning material was ash, specifically ash derived from burning certain plants, particularly those rich in sodium salts. This plant ash contained potash, potassium, carbonate, which is also alkaline. So you'd sometimes use natron, sometimes ash, and sometimes a mix of both. Using a combination of these alkaline salts likely provided a more effective cleaning action, tackling different types of grime. It's like mixing your basic laundry detergent with a booster packet, ancient Egyptian style. Though I doubt they had convenient single-use packets. It was probably more like a handful of this, maybe a handful of that approach. Quality control probably varied wildly. So you'd take your dirty linen, soak it in the natron or ash solution, and then the real work began. This is where the stomping, pounding, and rubbing came in. The alkaline solution loosened the dirt, but mechanical action was needed to actually remove it from the fabric fibers. You were essentially agitating the laundry by hand or foot, physically forcing the dirt out. No spin cycles or automated tumble actions here, just good old-fashioned elbow grease, or maybe knee grease, depending on your preferred technique. A quirky tidbit about these cleaning agents. Some evidence suggests they might have added aromatic resins or plant parts to the washing water, perhaps to counteract any unpleasant smells from the natron or the dirty linen itself. Imagine trying to make your ancient laundry smell like myrrh instead of salty dirt. Whether this was a common practice or reserved for the laundry of temples or the elite is unclear, but the idea of ancient fabric softener or scent booster is kind of fascinating, right? It shows they cared about how things smelled, not just how they looked. Though maybe the smell of clean linen fresh off the drying rack was enough of a reward. Were there other potential cleaning aids? Some scholars have suggested that certain plant extracts, like those from the soapwort plant, which does contain saponins, natural soap-like compounds, might have been used. However, historians still argue whether plant-based saponins were widely utilized specifically for laundry in ancient Egypt, or if their use was primarily for personal washing, or perhaps more for treating specific types of fabric or stains. The evidence for widespread laundry use of saponin-rich plants isn't as strong as for natron and ash. So while soapwort is a possibility, it's the mineral salts that were the undeniable heavy hitters in the ancient Egyptian laundry room, which was usually just outside. Using these substances regularly couldn't have been great for your hands. The high alkalinity of natron and ash would be drying and probably irritating to the skin. Professional laundrymen likely developed calluses and maybe even chronic skin issues. It was literally harsh work in a way we don't really experience with our pH-balanced, gentle detergents. Think about how your skin feels after washing dishes without gloves for a while. Now multiply that by 10 and add abrasive mineral powder. Ouch! They would have had to rinse the fabric thoroughly to remove all traces of the natron and ash, which would require a good amount of fresh water. This is another reason being by the Nile was so essential. You needed a clean water source not just for washing, but for rinsing the cleaning agents and the loosened dirt away. If you didn't rinse well enough, the residual salts could make the linen feel stiff or even hasten its deterioration over time. So the next time you toss your laundry in the machine, pour in some liquid detergent and press a button. Spare a thought for the ancient Egyptians and their bucket of natron and a pile of ash. Their cleaning materials were simple, natural, and required significant manual effort to be effective. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, and it definitely didn't involve a catchy jingle or a smiling spokesperson on a papyrus scroll. But it worked. It kept those millions of yards of white linen reasonably clean, which, given the dusty environment and lack of modern sanitation, was probably quite an achievement. So your linen is scrubbed, stomped, and thoroughly rinsed, smelling faintly of damp earth and maybe a hint of natron. What's next? You can't just leave wet linen lying around. It'll get mildewy, attract bugs, and generally defeat the purpose of all that hard work. The logical next step in a place like ancient Egypt is drying, and you had a distinct advantage here: sunshine. Lots and lots of sunshine. Once the water was squeezed out as much as possible, probably by wringing or twisting the fabric by hand, or perhaps laying it over a rounded surface and pressing down, the clothes needed to be spread out to dry. This wasn't a job for a tumble dryer, obviously. You were relying entirely on evaporation, powered by the desert sun and whatever breeze happened to be blowing off the Nile. The simplest way to dry clothes was just to spread them out flat on the ground. If you were working right by the riverbank, maybe you'd find a patch of clean sand or a smooth rock. The heat from the ground would help, but there was a downside: dust. Egypt is a dusty place. Laying your freshly washed, gleaming white linen directly on the ground was a guaranteed way to pick up some of that fine, ever-present grit. Not ideal if you wanted your clothes to stay pristine. A more sophisticated approach, likely used by professional launderers or wealthier households, involved elevated drying. Think ancient Egyptian clotheslines or drying racks. We see depictions in tombs and on temple walls showing fabric draped over poles or stretched out on wooden frames. This kept the linen off the ground, away from most of the dust, and allowed air to circulate more freely around it, speeding up the drying process. It also minimized the chance of creepy crawlies deciding your wet tunic was a cozy new home. Imagine pulling on a supposedly clean garment, only to find a scorpion had decided to nap in a fold. No thank you. A mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptian launderers and households primarily dried their linen by spreading it flat on the ground or draping it over poles or wooden frames to allow air and sunlight to evaporate the moisture. This method was efficient in Egypt's hot, dry climate. The sun was your friend for drying, but it could also be a bit harsh. Prolonged exposure to intense sunlight can eventually degrade linen fibers, just like it can fade colours, though most linen was undyed white anyway, or make fabrics brittle over time. For personal laundry, maybe this wasn't a huge concern. You just needed it dry for tomorrow. But for professional laundries handling valuable textiles for temples or royalty, preserving the fabric's integrity would have been important. Whether they had strategies for mitigating sun damage, like drying in the shade during the hottest part of the day, or covering the fabric with a lighter cloth, isn't entirely clear. Historians still argue whether specific drying techniques were employed beyond simple sun and air, drying to preserve the quality and lifespan of valuable linen textiles. Once the linen was dry, crisp and perhaps a little stiff from the natron residue if not rinsed perfectly, it might have needed some finishing touches. Linen is notorious for wrinkling. Today we have irons, steamers, and wrinkle-release sprays. The ancient Egyptians, they had other methods. There's evidence suggesting they used a form of pressing or smoothing. This might have involved simply folding the dry linen very carefully and pressing it flat under weights, or perhaps using smooth stones or wooden blocks to rub or press the fabric on a hard surface. Imagine sitting there, patiently rubbing a smooth river stone over a piece of dried linen to try and get the creases out. It sounds tedious and probably wasn't nearly as effective as modern ironing, but it would help make the garment look neater. For important ceremonial or elite clothing, presentation was everything, so smoothing out wrinkles would have been essential. A quirky tidbit about finishing: while not strictly ironing, some depictions seem to show fabric being stretched or pulled taut while drying or after, which could help reduce wrinkles. There's even speculation that heated stones might have been used, although concrete archaeological evidence for this specific laundry application is scarce. It's more likely they relied on mechanical pressing rather than heat, which makes sense given the tools they had readily available. After drying and perhaps a bit of pressing, the linen was ready to be folded or rolled. We see depictions of carefully folded textiles in tombs, sometimes even stacked neatly. Rolling was another common method, particularly for longer bolts of fabric. Imagine trying to get a crisp, even fold on a long linen tunic that's been sun-dried and hand-pressed with a rock. It would take practice, patience, and probably a lot of sighing. This folding and rolling wasn't just about neatness, it also made storage and transport easier. Speaking of transport, the linen might need to go back to its owner, whether that was a nearby house, a temple, or a royal palace. If you were a professional launderer, this would be part of your service. Bundles of freshly washed, dried and folded linen being carried through the streets or along the riverbank must have been a common sight. They might have been wrapped in a protective cloth to keep them clean during transit. After all that effort, you wouldn't want to get them dusty or dirty again on the way home. That would be like picking up your dry cleaning only to trip and drop it in a puddle on the sidewalk. Infuriating in any era. The entire process, from fetching water to drying and folding, required significant time and physical labour. It wasn't a quick load and forget operation. It was a multi-day endeavour, dependent on the weather, the flow of the river, and the availability of labour. And while the concept of laundry day might sound universal, the ancient Egyptian version was a much more intensive and demanding chore than most of us can easily imagine today. You definitely earned that moment of rest when the last piece was dry and folded. Think about the sheer volume of linen needed in ancient Egypt. Everyone wore it. Temples used it for ritual purposes. The dead were wrapped in it. This wasn't a small-scale, occasional task. It was a constant ongoing process that was fundamental to keeping the population clothed and supplied with clean textiles in a society that valued cleanliness, especially for religious and elite purposes. The humble act of washing clothes by the Nile, drying them in the sun, and carefully folding them was a crucial part of the rhythm of life along the river, as vital in its own way as farming or building. You've got your linen dried, perhaps even smoothed a little bit by pressing or stretching. Now, before we think too much about putting it away or back on, let's consider the fabric itself. Because in ancient Egypt, when we talk about laundry, almost 99% of the time, we're talking about linen. This wasn't a society with a wide variety of fabrics like we have today. No cotton t-shirts. Cotton wasn't common in Egypt then. No polyester blends, no fluffy wool sweaters. Wool was actually considered impure and generally avoided, especially in religious contexts. It was linen, linen, everywhere linen. Why linen? Well, imagine living in a climate where the sun beats down relentlessly for most of the year, and temperatures can soar. You need clothing that is lightweight, breathable and wicks moisture away from the body. Linen fits the bill perfectly. Made from the fibres of the flax plant, it's naturally cool against the skin and perhaps most importantly for our story, it could be processed to a brilliant, crisp white. White was the colour of purity, cleanliness, and was highly valued, especially for religious ceremonies and elite clothing. Wearing pristine white linen wasn't just a fashion statement, it carried social and symbolic weight. A mainstream historical fact. Linen was the primary textile material in ancient Egypt, cultivated from the flax plant, and its prevalence was due to its suitability for the hot climate and its cultural significance, particularly the value placed on white, clean fabric. The production of linen was a whole industry in itself, involving growing the flax, harvesting it, retting, soaking it to break down the stalk, beating and combing the fibres, a process called scutching and heckling, spinning the fibres into thread, and finally weaving the thread into cloth. It was labour-intensive work, producing a fabric that was durable, but also relatively stiff compared to modern cotton or synthetics. This stiffness is why wrinkles were such a persistent issue, even after drying and pressing. Because linen was so central to life, keeping it clean was more than just a chore. It was a necessity for comfort, health, and social standing. And while we've talked a lot about natron as a key cleaning agent, it wasn't the only thing ancient Egyptians might have used, or perhaps used alongside natron for different purposes, or by different social classes. Think about the various substances that can help clean. Beyond alkaline salts like natron or modern washing soda, you have things that can cut grease, lift stains, or simply act as a mild abrasive to help loosen dirt. The Egyptians had a practical understanding of the properties of various natural materials. One potential cleaning aid would have come from ash. Burning plant material, particularly certain types of wood or plants, produces ash rich in alkaline salts like potassium carbonate, potash, or sodium carbonate. While chemically distinct from natron, which is a naturally occurring blend including sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, ash lye could serve a similar purpose, reacting with fats and oils to form a kind of crude soap and helping to loosen acidic dirt. So you might imagine someone supplementing their wash water, perhaps away from the main natron deposits, by adding lye leached from wood ash. This could have been especially relevant for commoners who might not have had easy access to large quantities of natron, like the professional launderers serving temples or the wealthy. Historians still argue whether alkaline substances derived from plant ash were commonly used alongside or as a substitute for natron in everyday laundry, or if natron was the universal standard for serious cleaning. Another possibility involves clays or earth. Fuller's earth, for example, is a type of absorbent clay that has been used for centuries to degrease wool and other fibres because it can absorb oils and other impurities. While more commonly associated with cleaning wool if it were used at all, it's conceivable that some form of absorbent earth could have been rubbed into stains on linen before washing to help lift grease or grime. It wouldn't dissolve dirt like an alkali, but it could physically absorb it. And then there's the intriguing possibility of plant-based cleaners. Some plants contain saponins, naturally occurring compounds that produce a soapy lather when mixed with water. Think of soapwort or certain roots. While there isn't overwhelming direct evidence pointing to specific saponin-rich plants being cultivated and used on a large scale, specifically for laundry in ancient Egypt, it's not outside the realm of possibility for localized or household use. You'd rub the plant material, maybe a root, get a bit of a lather, and apply it to a particularly stubborn spot. It would be like their version of a pre-treatment spray, only you had to dig it up first. Probably a good workout just to get started on your laundry. A quirky tidbit about potential cleaners. While direct evidence is limited, there are suggestions that substances like dried dung, not just for sunscreen apparently, might have been used in some cleaning processes, potentially for their ammonia content, which is a known degreaser. However, the idea of using manure to clean clothes you wanted to wear again, well, it highlights how different their approach was, or perhaps suggests this was for very rough textiles, not fine linen. Let's hope that was just a fringe practice, though, frankly, after stomping clothes with feet that have been on the riverbank, maybe it's not that big a jump. Trying to get that smell out sounds like a job for something stronger than natron. The different cleaning agents likely weren't used interchangeably. Natron seems to have been the workhorse, effective for general cleaning and whitening thanks to its alkalinity. Ash lye would have provided a similar alkaline boost, perhaps more readily available in some areas or for poorer families. Clays or plant extracts might have been used for specific types of stains or as supplementary treatments. The choice probably depended on availability, cost, the type of garment, rough cloth versus fine linen, and the level of cleanliness required. Cleaning a temple cloth was probably a more rigorous process than washing a fisherman's tunic. Imagine the knowledge passed down through generations of launderers or housewives. They would have known which stain needed what treatment, which type of ash produced the best cleaning lye, and how long to soak the linen to get it truly clean without damaging the fibres. It was a practical science, honed through trial and error over centuries. They wouldn't have understood the chemistry in modern terms, but they knew what worked. Sort of like knowing you need baking soda for one spill and vinegar for another, even if you don't recall the exact chemical reaction off the top of your head. So, the next time you toss a load of white clothes into your washing machine and add some detergent, spare a thought for the ancient Egyptians and their limited toolkit. They didn't have specialized stain removers or fabric softeners. They had water, sun, alkaline salts like natron and ash, maybe some clay, and a whole lot of elbow grease, or perhaps foot grease given the stomping. And yet they managed to produce the dazzling white linen that was so characteristic of their civilization. It speaks volumes about their ingenuity and the sheer amount of effort dedicated to maintaining cleanliness in a world without modern conveniences. Getting that perfectly white tunic was a serious achievement. Probably harder than getting that perfectly folded fitted sheet today. Some things never change, right? So you've gone through the whole rigmarole. You've soaked, you've scrubbed, you've stomped, you've rinsed in the lovely brown flow of the Nile, and you've wrestled that stiff wet linen into submission on the drying racks or laid out on the warm sand. Now it's dry, finally dry. You pick it up feeling the unique texture of properly laundered linen. It's not soft and drapey like a modern t-shirt. It's got a definite crispness, a stiffness that speaks of clean, tightly woven fibres and the sun-drying process. Maybe it even makes a faint rustling sound as you handle it. The goal, remember, was often whiteness. For many garments, especially those worn by priests, nobles, or for formal occasions, a dazzling, almost blinding white was the ideal. This wasn't just aesthetic. As we'll touch on later, whiteness carried profound religious and symbolic meaning in ancient Egypt. So as you inspect your handiwork, you're checking for that pristine hue. Are there still any faint spots of mud from the riverbank? Any lingering traces of that questionable food stain? Hopefully not. The alkaline natron, the sun's bleaching power, and all that physical effort should have done the trick. A mainstream historical fact. Achieving and maintaining bright white linen was highly valued in ancient Egyptian society, signifying purity, cleanliness, and social status, and was a primary goal of the laundry process. Even when it's dry, that stiffness means it's probably not perfectly smooth. Remember the discussion about pressing or smoothing? This would likely happen after drying. You might spread the garment out on a flat surface, perhaps a clean mat or a large, smooth stone, and use a smooth, rounded stone or a piece of wood to press down and rub across the fabric, working out some of the worst wrinkles. It's not ironing as we know it, with heat and steam, but more of a physical smoothing process, trying to break down some of those stiff creases. Imagine trying to smooth out a thick piece of paper just by rubbing it really hard. You get the idea. It's labour, again, just to make the clothes look presentable. You wouldn't necessarily do this for every piece of clothing, especially rough work tunics, but for finer garments or those worn by the elite, a degree of smoothness, almost thinness, would have been desired. Once clean and dry, and perhaps minimally smoothed, the clothes needed to be put away. This part might seem mundane, but how you stored your clean linen was just as important as getting it clean in the first place. You didn't want all that hard work to go to waste by letting it get dirty again, or worse, become infested with pests. Storage methods would have varied based on wealth and social standing, just like the laundry process itself. In humbler homes, clothes might be simply folded or rolled and placed on shelves or in woven baskets. Space was often at a premium, so simple, practical storage was key. In wealthier households, temples, or palaces, storage was more sophisticated. Linen would be carefully folded, and given the stiffness, this might have involved some serious creasing, maybe even deliberately sharp creases like a well-folded shirt today, but achieved differently. These folded garments would then be placed inside wooden chests or wardrobes. These storage containers weren't just functional. Some could be quite elaborate, decorated with paint or carvings, acting as pieces of furniture in their own right. Think of them as the ancient Egyptian version of a cedar chest, though cedar wasn't always available. Acacia or other local woods were common. Storing clean laundry well wasn't just about tidiness, it was protection. Pests like moths or other insects could damage valuable linen fibres. While there isn't definitive evidence of widespread use of specific moth repellents within storage chests in ancient Egypt purely for clothes, we know they used aromatic plants and substances for various purposes, including embalming and perfumery. Historians still argue whether fragrant herbs or other natural repellents were commonly placed among stored linen specifically to deter pests, or if cleanliness and regular airing were the primary defences. It is a fascinating thought, opening a chest not to the smell of cedar, but maybe dried herbs or something a bit more exotic, maybe something minty or something you wouldn't want to accidentally iron onto your tunic. A quirky tidbit about potential storage practices. There are some suggestions from texts and depictions that Egyptians might have stored fine linens rolled rather than folded to minimize hard creases, especially for delicate pieces. This would be like carefully rolling a fancy dress or suit to pack it in a suitcase today to avoid wrinkles, an ancient packing hack. The care taken in folding and storing also speaks to the value of the linen itself. Cloth was a significant asset. It was labor-intensive to produce, could be traded, and represented wealth. Keeping it in good condition was an economic necessity, so you wouldn't just shove your clean linen haphazardly into a corner, you'd treat it with respect. Imagine the scene. After a long day of washing and drying by the river, you or perhaps a servant carefully carries the stack of crisp linen back to the house. The garments are smoothed, folded with care, and placed into chests or onto shelves, maybe categorized by type. Tunics here, kilts there, shawls somewhere else. It was a systematic process, the final step in the cycle of use and renewal for these vital pieces of clothing. It was their equivalent of putting away the laundry today, but without the satisfying click of the drawer closing smoothly. Probably more of a thump as the heavy wooden lid came down. This care and storing wasn't just for daily wear. Special garments like ceremonial robes or the fine linens used in burial would have been stored with even greater care. These items held immense value, both material and spiritual, and preserving them in pristine condition was paramount. So while your average tunic might end up simply folded in a basket, the high priest's robe made of ultrafine linen would be meticulously stored, perhaps in a specially constructed chest, possibly within the temple precincts themselves. Even the way they folded might tell us something. Was there a standard method? Did different types of garments require different folds? We don't have a detailed ancient Egyptian laundry manual explaining step-by-step folding techniques, but depictions on tombs and temples sometimes show stacks of neatly folded cloth, suggesting a system was in place. This structure and organization, even in something as seemingly simple as folding and storing laundry, reflects the broader Egyptian emphasis on order, or me'at, in all aspects of life. Even your linen had to be in its proper place. So you close the chest, or smooth down the pile on the shelf, the clean linen is ready for its next use. This cycle of washing, drying, smoothing and storing was a constant rhythm in ancient Egyptian life, dictated by the needs of the climate, the nature of their primary fabric, and the cultural values they placed on cleanliness and appearance. It's a reminder that even the most boring historical topics, like doing the laundry, involved complex processes, specific materials, varying social practices, and held significant cultural weight. And just thinking about folding all that stiff linen probably makes you appreciate your nice, soft, easy-to-fold synthetics just a little bit more, doesn't it? You've just finished the process for your linen, or perhaps the linen of your household. But think about this for a moment. Who you are in ancient Egyptian society dictates almost everything about this laundry experience. Social status wasn't just about where you lived or what job you did. It profoundly impacted the clothes you wore, the materials they were made from, how often they were washed, and even who did the washing. This whole chore, as seemingly universal as cleaning something dirty, was deeply stratified. If you were a farmer or a labourer, working long hours under the hot sun, your clothes would likely be simpler, coarser linen. Maybe not even the finest weave. They would get dirty, truly dirty, with soil, sweat, and who knows what else from working in the fields or on construction sites. You wouldn't have the luxury of many changes of clothes, so washing would be a practical necessity, likely done by you or your family, down by the nearest convenient spot on the Nile or a canal. The process would be basic. Dunking, trampling, rubbing with sand or perhaps some simple alkaline substance if you could get it, and laying them out to dry wherever you could find space. Durability and basic cleanliness would be the goal, not dazzling whiteness. Your clothes were tools needing to be functional above all else. You probably weren't too worried about ironing out wrinkles. Who has time for that when the sun's coming up and there's work to be done? It's a bit like comparing washing your work boots to washing your fancy dress shoes. Different level of care entirely. Now, climb the social ladder a bit. Imagine you're a scribe, a craftsman, or a merchant. You'd likely have more clothes, made of better quality linen. Maybe you even owned a kilt that wasn't perpetually stained with mud. You'd still need to do laundry, but perhaps you could afford a bit more natron, or maybe even pay someone a little something to help you out. Your clothes needed to look respectable, reflecting your position. Cleanliness here starts to blend practicality with social presentation, but if you were part of the elite, a priest, a noble, or even the pharaoh himself or herself, laundry was a whole different ballgame. Your clothes would be made of the finest, sheerest linen, and sometimes it's so thin you could see through it, known as royal linen or fine royal linen. These garments were incredibly valuable, intricately pleated, and designed to showcase wealth and status. You absolutely would not be down at the Nile, stomping on your own robes. Oh no, a mainstream historical fact. The quality and quantity of linen garments were significant indicators of social status and wealth in ancient Egypt, with the elite possessing vast quantities of the finest weaves. For the elite, laundry was performed by servants, often specialized laundrymen or women. We know this from tomb depictions and texts. These people had the specific task of keeping their master's extensive wardrobe in pristine condition. They would have access to the best materials, ample supplies of natron, perhaps softer water from specific locations, and the time and resources to perform the washing carefully. The sheer volume of clothing owned by the wealthy also meant laundry was a constant large-scale operation. Imagine having chest after chest filled with fine linen garments, all needing to be kept clean and ready. This wasn't a weekly chore, it was probably a daily task for the household staff. Some large estates or temples even had dedicated laundry areas. This leads to a quirky tidbit. Some temple records show provisions for significant amounts of natron and water allocated specifically for washing the garments of the priests' and deities' statues. Yes, even the statues got their clothes washed. This wasn't about hygiene for stone, obviously, but about maintaining ritual purity and respecting the divine. The laundry for statues was a deeply symbolic act. Imagine being the guy assigned to wash a god's kilt, probably paid well but high pressure to get it right. Historians still argue whether common laundromats or centralized washing facilities existed for ordinary people beyond just gathering at a riverbank, or if laundry was almost exclusively a household or a state activity. While people certainly congregated at the water source, the level of organization or commercial service for washing for the masses is debated. Was there an ancient Egyptian version of a laundromat attendant? Probably not, but maybe someone offering to sell you a scoop of natron near the river. The type of dirt also varied by class. A farmer's dirt was external, a noble's dirt might be more about sweat, perfumes, or spills from elaborate meals. Keeping fine white linen impeccably clean was a major challenge and a point of pride. Stains on the clothing of the elite would have been highly visible and socially undesirable. Their reliance on servants meant they were literally rarely insulated from the grittier aspects of life and laundry. The social divide extended to the care of the clothes after washing too. While a labourer might just hang their tunic on a bush or lay it on a rock, the fine linen of a noble would be carefully handled, smoothed, folded, and stored in those elaborate wooden chests we talked about. The servants responsible for this would need skill to prevent damage to the delicate fabric and maintain any pleats or folds. So the next time you toss a load into your washing machine, remember that in ancient Egypt the simple act of cleaning clothes was a mirror reflecting the complex social hierarchy. From the rough sun-baked tunic of the fellahin to the pristine, translucent robe of a priest. The journey from dirty to clean varied immensely based on who you were, and for the vast majority it was a manual, back-breaking, and often muddy task undertaken just to keep functional garments wearable. Sleep on that. So you've pondered the different laundry experiences based on your place in the social pyramid. For most, it was a personal or family chore, but move into those higher echelons and you encounter the world of professional laundry. Yes, that was a job. Imagine applying for that position today, seeking experienced candidate for full-time manual laundry services. Must be comfortable with water, heat, alkali substances, and potential Nile wildlife. Benefits include potential access to discarded noble lint. Sign me up. These weren't just random household slaves occasionally told to wash some clothes. In larger, wealthier households, temples, and especially the royal palace, there were individuals, sometimes entire groups, whose primary task was laundry. They were the ancient world's dry cleaners and laundromat attendants rolled into one, minus the actual dry cleaning part and plus a whole lot of physical labour. These individuals were often referred to as washers or fullers. The term fuller in later periods sometimes implied more than just washing, including treating fabrics, but in the Egyptian context it seems to cover the laundry process. A mainstream historical fact, professional laundry workers existed in ancient Egypt, particularly serving the elite, temples and state institutions. Their role was crucial for maintaining the vast and valuable linen inventories of these entities. Think about the scale. A temple or a palace didn't have a few tunics to wash. They had rooms, maybe even warehouses full of textiles. Linens for priests, clothing for temple staff, hangings, coverings, even clothing for the statues of gods, remember? The royal family's wardrobe alone would be immense. Keeping all of this clean and in good repair required a dedicated workforce. These professional washers would likely have been more skilled than the average person washing their own clothes. They would know the best spots on the river, understand how much natron or other cleansing agent to use for different types of dirt or fabric, and be adept at the physical process of trampling, beating and rinsing without damaging the delicate linen. They probably developed their own techniques and efficiencies passed down through experience. Did they have a union? Probably not in the modern sense. But they were part of the specialized labor force that kept ancient Egypt running. Just like there were scribes, farmers, builders and bakers, there were also laundry professionals. Their job was essential for maintaining the standards of cleanliness and appearance, particularly in religious and courtly settings where purity and presentation were paramount. The conditions of their work were likely challenging. Hours spent stooped over in the water, hauling wet textiles, exposed to the sun and the river environment. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was a necessary one. And given the value placed on fine linen, their skill would have been appreciated, even if they weren't high status themselves. Imagine being the only person who could consistently get the pharaoh's white kilt perfectly clean, job security maybe. Evidence for these professionals comes from various sources, including tomb scenes depicting people involved in textile work and washing, and administrative texts detailing provisions for temples and palaces. These texts sometimes list supplies like natron and oil used for cleaning or finishing, and mention personnel involved in textile care. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Some texts suggest that certain temples owned large flocks of sheep, not just for meat or wool, but also for their dung, which, when processed or used in specific ways, could potentially play a role in textile treatment or cleaning processes. The idea of dung being part of the laundry supply chain is, well, it adds a certain organic touch, doesn't it? Though the specifics of its use are debated, it hints at the complex and sometimes surprising resources utilised. Historians still argue whether the fullers mentioned in some later texts had a distinct guild structure or specific workshops independent of large estates or temples, or if they were primarily employees tied to larger institutions. Was there a network of freelance ancient Egyptian laundry services, or were they always attached to a specific household, temple, or the state? The degree of their independence is a point of scholarly discussion. For institutional laundry, logistics were key. Getting large quantities of dirty linens to the washing site, having enough water and supplies, managing the drying and pressing or pleating process for potentially hundreds or thousands of items, and then getting them back to where they belonged. This required coordination and organisation. It wasn't just someone casually doing a load, it was an industrial-scale operation by ancient standards. Imagine the scene. A designated area near the Nile or a canal, perhaps walled off to protect from crocodiles. That charming possibility never fully goes away, does it? Piles of linen waiting, groups of workers, men and women, engaged in the strenuous physical labour, trampling, rubbing, rinsing, the air filled with the smell of wet linen, maybe the faint sharp odour of natron or ash lye, and the general scent of the river. It would be a hive of activity, driven by the constant need to keep the institution supplied with clean textiles. This wasn't just about cleanliness for comfort. For temples and priests, it was about ritual purity. Priests often had to be ritually clean, wearing clean linen garments before performing religious duties. The cleanliness of the temple itself and its furnishings, including textiles, was also a religious requirement. So the job of the professional washer in a temple had a sacred dimension, adding another layer of importance to their labour. Contrast this with your own struggles with a single load of stubborn towels. These professionals handled the entire wardrobe of a deity or a king. That's next level. It makes you appreciate the sheer human power and logistical effort involved in maintaining appearances and fulfilling religious obligations in a world without machines. Their skill, strength, and knowledge of the properties of various natural cleansers were their tools. It's a reminder that behind every grand facade in history there was a lot of necessary, often unheralded, physical labour, like keeping all those fancy linen kilts sparkling white. So you've navigated the world of professional washers and caught a glimpse into the scale of institutional laundry in ancient Egypt. But let's zoom back out for a moment, past the royal linen storehouses and temple workshops, back to the riverbank, the heart of the whole process. Think of the journey you've taken from selecting your dirty tunic, likely linen of course, unless you were very poor or very specialised, gathering your supplies, maybe a basket, some natron crystals, a bit of ash from the hearth. You made the trek to the Nile or a nearby canal, finding a suitable spot, maybe shared with neighbours, maybe contested by geese or even something toothier. You'd kneel or squat by the edge, the water cool or maybe unpleasantly warm depending on the time of year and day. You'd soak the garment, feeling the fabric go heavy and limp, watching the initial grime cloud the water around it. Then came the hard part, the manual labour. Rubbing the fabric against itself, against a stone, or perhaps trampling it underfoot in a basin or right there in the shallows. Adding your cleaning agent, the natron, the ash lye, perhaps a mixture, feeling the slight slipperiness or harshness depending on what you used. It was repetitive, strenuous work. Beat, rub, rinse, beat, rub, rinse, over and over, trying to coax the dirt and sweat from the fibres. Imagine the sounds, the sloshing water, the thudding of fabric on stone, maybe the rhythmic chanting or chatting of the women and men around you, perhaps the distant lowing of cattle or the squawk of an ibis, the smell of damp linen mixing with the earthy, fishy scent of the river, maybe the alkaline tang of the cleaning agents. Not exactly a trip to the spa, is it? more like a manual washing machine stuck on the perpetually muddy setting. After you felt the garment was as clean as it was going to get, and clean by ancient standards was probably a different concept than our bleach and optical brightener version, came the rinsing. Lots of rinsing, swishing the fabric in clean water to get out the residual dirt and the cleanser itself. Then wringing, twisting the heavy wet linen with all your strength to get out as much water as possible. Then the drying, spreading the fabric on the sand over bushes or hanging it on lines if you had them, letting the relentless Egyptian sun and dry air do their work, watching it lighten as it dried, hoping it wouldn't get too dusty or be snatched by a scavenger. If you were lucky enough to own fine linen, maybe you'd consider a bit of bleaching, exposing it to sun while damp, or perhaps using sulfur fumes in special setups, though sulfur could damage the fibres. Then, if you were aiming for high fashion, came the pleating, a painstaking process likely done while the fabric was still damp, folding and weighting it to create those crisp, permanent folds seen on statues and in tomb paintings. It really makes you look at ancient Egyptian depictions differently now, doesn't it? Every pleat a testament to human effort. A mainstream historical fact, linen was overwhelmingly the fabric of choice for clothing in ancient Egypt across most social strata, prized for its breathability in the hot climate and its association with purity, requiring constant and careful cleaning. This entire process, from dirty garment to clean, dry, and perhaps pleated one, wasn't a quick task. It took time, physical effort, and access to resources. It was a fundamental part of daily life, woven into the rhythm of the Nile and the demands of the climate and culture. Cleanliness, while not always for germ theory reasons, they didn't have that obviously, was important for comfort, social presentation, and, as we touched on, religious purity. Priests wore clean linen as a ritual requirement. Presenting oneself or offerings to the gods often involved a state of cleanliness. It wasn't just vanity, it had deeper cultural and spiritual roots. Consider the sheer volume of water moved and used over millennia. Trillions of gallons, hand-hauled or accessed at the river's edge, all for washing clothes. It's a staggering thought. And the amount of human energy expended, the sore backs, the chapped hands, the hours under the sun. It puts our modern washing machines, which you can just load, press a button, and forget about until the little tune plays, into rather stark perspective. It's like comparing a flint knife to a laser cutter. Both get a job done, but the method is just slightly different. This constant need for clean textiles also tells us something about the Egyptian economy and society. Growing flax, processing it into linen fibre, spinning yarn, weaving fabric, sewing garments, and then maintaining them through washing, it was a massive industry and labour sector. The availability and quality of linen, and how clean you could keep it, were very real indicators of status. Dirty, ragged clothes were a sign of poverty or misfortune. Crisp, white linen spoke of resources and respectability. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. While white linen was standard and symbolised purity, Egyptians also dyed some textiles, though dyed clothing seems to have been less common for daily wear than white linen, especially among the elite. These dyes came from natural sources, plants, insects, minerals, adding another layer of complexity to the textile and laundry cycle. Imagine trying to get a pomegranate-dyed tunic clean without stripping the colour, another headache these ancient washers faced. Historians still argue whether the specific techniques for bleaching, dyeing and pleating linen were widely known household skills or specialised crafts passed down through families or guilds. Were there secrets to achieving that perfect permanent pleat that only certain people knew? Or could any determined individual with enough practice master the techniques? The level of specialisation outside of the large institutional settings remains a point of scholarly discussion. So, you see, doing laundry in ancient Egypt was far more than just a chore. It was physically demanding, tied to the rhythms of the environment, deeply integrated into the social fabric, reflective of economic status, and even connected to religious practice. It required specific knowledge of materials and techniques, passed down through generations. It was a testament to human resilience and ingenuity, finding ways to keep clean and presentable in a world without plumbing, electricity, or Tide Pods. They were, in their own way, textile engineers and chemical technicians, making the best of the resources available to them. And while it might sound boring at first glance, the reality is a complex, fascinating window into the daily lives, values, and challenges of one of history's most enduring civilizations.